Good morning, everyone.
They do, don't they? They're having problems coming to get here.
We are still somewhere around 1 Kings, somewhere in the neighborhood of chapter 4 this morning. We have been looking at 1 Kings, and you may remember the last time we were looking at kind of an odd little passage that was thrown in there, seemingly out of place, on Solomon and his wisdom to judge between good and evil. And we had the baby that was going to get cut in two with a sword, you may remember, and his ability to sort out the real mother from the pretender. And if you will recall, these things seem to be out of place, and yet the writer appears to have put these things in to point back to the promises that were made to Solomon when he was up asking God for wisdom to rule his people. And you remember he took the whole nation and they went up for the place where the brazen altar was, and they sacrificed there and confessed their sin. And out of that, God then basically came to him and said, "What do you want? You say the word and you've got it." And he was already, I think, inspired by God's Spirit to request wisdom rather than lots of other things. And so now we kind of are going to be seeing some things that you struggle with them because you kind of go, "Oh, that's interesting, so what?" But I think the big so what of a lot of them is that they all point back to that moment when God said, "Not only am I going to give you wisdom, but I'm going to give you honor. I'm going to, all these other things that you could have asked for, I am going to give them to you." And some of these things we're looking at that may seem a little out of place point back to that, and it's like God saying, "What I said, I'm going to deliver." And that he is in the process of delivering on what he promised to him. And the one thing that I found really interesting as you go through this, and it talks about, it's the way it appears to be presented as, this is just the way it happened. This is the way it came about. Here's who the people were, and this is what happened. It's not one of these deals where he is now, having gotten that promise, going, "Okay, God, I'm going to go out and try to work and find where I can get riches and find where I can get fame and figure out how and promote himself." He's not doing that. It just happens, and he's going about his daily life, doing business the way as best he knows how, running the country to the best of his ability, and this is what takes place, and you see God's hand of blessing on it. As a big contrast, remember we talked about, can you ask God for things? Does he give you the opportunity to say, what do you want? And we looked at the New Testament passages that said, "Ask and you shall receive," and we followed those through to find out that you ask in God's will. What does that mean? Ask with God's Spirit guiding you. And basically, when you have God's heart, you see the world through God's eyes, and you see what he wants, and your wants become his, and you say the word, and they're there, because that's what God is doing, and you're part of it. And that's what we see in this king as he's going on. In 1 Kings 4, really fits that description. I can't find a whole bunch of great inspirational truths to pull out of 1 Kings 4. I really wrestled with this, trying to figure out, it's like background information you need to have for later, I guess, and that you want to store away, and it fits with other things, but in and of itself, it's really hard to get real excited about. But we will take a look at it, and I want you to realize as we look at this, we're looking at probably mid-term here, halfway or somewhere in the middle of his reign, so give or take 20 years from the beginning that we've been studying about. We've kind of fast-forwarded up now. You'll see why as we get into it. You'll see it has to be later because when he started out, his children were pretty young. And we're going to find a couple that are older. So it's important important to kind of place yourself. And the first thing he does in chapter 4 is go through some of the officials of the kingdom, which is tedious because it's got a whole bunch of weird names. But let's go through a little bit of this and at least understand what it is that's there as best we can. It says, these were his officials. Oh, I should start with, now King Solomon was king over all Israel, as pointed out in the beginning. And these were his officials. Azariah, the son of Zadok, was, and it says the priest, but we'll talk about that later. Elihoreph and Ahijah. I love these names. Kathy got me a little program thing I have not used yet, as you can tell, that you can put these names in and it will pronounce them for you. And I'd be there all day trying to understand. Anyway, so the sons of Shisha were secretaries. Jehoshaphat, the son of Elihud, was a recorder. Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the army. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. And Azariah, the son of Nathan, was over the deputies. And Zabud, the son of Nathan, a priest, was the king's friend. And Ashishar was over the household. And Adoniram, the son of Abda, was over the men subject to forced labor. And then it goes into his 12 deputies, which we'll take in another bite. So that's great plenty to bite off of weird names to start with. The first thing that's interesting as you go by is the very first line says he was king over all Israel. Well, duh, we already knew that, right? But there seems to be an emphasis on that aspect of it. Because not too far in the distant past, when David started out, how was it? It was split up, wasn't it? We had two separate ones. David started out ruling over Judah, and then eventually was able to bring Israel in. When Solomon starts out, he's got all Israel, and he maintains it through his reign, but only through his reign, and we're back apart again. So a rare period of time in the history of the nation when we have one king. It's only happened twice so far. Will happen one third time, when all Israel will be ruled by one king. So it's significant to point out for everybody, he ruled over the whole nation, all the tribes. And these were his officials. The first one is Azariah, the son of Zadok. And the term that's used for priest there in Hebrew, not being a Hebrew scholar, I'm going to take the best Hebrew scholars' advice that I've got. And you would be, you know, there's the discussions, there's the commentators. And the commentators have all these different ideas and things that they kind of argue back and forth over. In case you hadn't guessed it, Hebrew scholars are the same way. There's 3 or 4 main old dead guys, and they have got their different arguments over the Hebrew and what's it mean. And if you've seen original Hebrew script, you'll understand why, because it's just a whole string of consonants from backwards for us across the page, line after line after line, no breaks or anything, no vowels in there, it's all consonants. And you have to know kind of what's going on to be able to figure that out. And at some point in history, they went in and updated the text, and they put in vowel pointings, which helps pronounce the words. But there's still argument then over where do you divide, how the word's divided. Was there anything left out? Is there a copyist error in here? Which there are some, as it's been passed down. Are there some little things that change, some stuff? Anyway, so one way to translate this was the priest. The term is, the words are kind of used that way, and if you squish them the right way. And the guys that I have come to trust the most say, no, actually, it would probably be better to translate this as the administrator or prime minister. He is the guy who's in charge of running the country for the king. He represents the king to the people. So if you think of the prime minister of England, who's, you know, they've got the king and queen and all that over here, and then they got the prime minister that at one time, now the king and queen are kind of the figurehead, but at one time the king and queen ruled and the prime minister served under them to administer the country. So we have this guy, and I'm just going to put A there because I don't have to write this whole word out, and he is so the prime minister. And you're thinking, isn't that exciting? The only exciting thing about that is when we went through the same list with David's reign, does anybody remember who the first person mentioned was when it went through? There's 2 times we went through the list of David's officials. One earlier in his reign and one later. Do you remember who was the first guy mentioned? It wasn't Zadok. It was Joab. It was the military. It was always, in David's reign, the first guy mentioned was always a military guy. Because he was in the midst of fighting all the battles and expanding the country and dealing with all the ones that were coming at him, the Philistines and others. The most important thing in his reign was to have your military together. Now all of a sudden under Solomon, the first guy listed is the administrator of the nation. Really interesting change, because the other guy is going to be mentioned, and he's down here in verse 4. He's several down the list before we get to the military guy. So it tells you something about the state of the nation. This is one of the most important roles for his reign, is to have somebody that can run this big thing, because it's increased tremendously in size.
Also, it indicated a time of peace.
Yes. Yeah, that is the big pressure now. You still have to have the military, you still need them out there, they're still doing some little things out there, but it is a time of peace. There are not major battles during Solomon's time. So then we have the next 2 guys, Eli, Horeph, and Ahijah. The sons of Shisha were secretaries. Probably, this is Eli and I, E and I here, and I know where O is. It says secretaries, and they suggest that probably the best way to understand it, this would be secretaries of state. Is their job. And their father was the same role for David. The guy who's mentioned here as being the sons of Shisha. If you go back and look at 2 Samuel, we'll see his name pop up. And then we have Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat over here is the recorder. And the term that they used to, if I got my notes here, you've heard of England, the Lord Chancellor. That's the guy. This is the guy who is responsible for keeping track of everything, often associated with budget issues as well. So you've got a guy there. These secretaries of state, again, would be those who dealing with the administration underneath this prime minister. Of course, now we tend to think of these folks as dealing with a lot of foreign policy. So interesting that there's 2 guys doing this. And if you think about remember the size of the nation and the influence of the nation and how many, it makes sense that you might need 2 of these people dealing with foreign policy issues. So he's got a big group of folks here keeping track of all the ins and outs of politics and finances. And then in number 4, we got Ben down here. And he is over the military. And which he still needs. And he is not falling on anybody these days. Those of you who missed that part. If you go back a chapter or 2, every time we're weeding out the problem children in the nations, you look out, Benaniah went out and fell on them. So we were telling, if you're out there, see somebody in a big jersey with Benaniah on the back, stay away from them. They'll crush you. And then an interesting passage. This one gets a lot of discussion among commentators. The second half of that verse, Zadok and Abiathar were priests. You got Zadok and Abiathar are the priests. Why is that odd?
One of them got just barred there to start.
That guy right there got sent off,
Banished.
banished. Why would his name show up here? Everybody going, why would that be? The only thing that they seem to agree on is that this is a position that's inherited from your father. You inherit the role of high priest. They inherited that. He still has the title, and remember, the reason that he wasn't killed is because of his service to David. And Solomon said, because of your service to my father and everything, you keep your head. But you're no longer an active priest. You're going to get banished back to your hometown, and that's where you'll spend the rest of your life. So he's still a high priest. He never really lost that title, and it's almost a thing of respect that that name is listed there. There's a little bit of grace there, I think. That God says, I still am going to list you as one of the high priests, even though you aren't functioning as high priest. Zadok is the guy. So, little snippet of grace in the midst of that.
How many languages did they have to deal with there at that time, do you know?
You know, I have no idea, but there must have been dozens, if not hundreds, because every little tribe had their dialects and things, much like it is today in a lot of places of the world, where you don't have to go very far to find a new language. So I would guess there's probably a half a dozen or so major languages that were spoken, probably Egyptian, of course Hebrew, a couple of them on the east side of the Jordan, and then from Babylon, Persia area, there was probably one or two over there. So there were probably half a dozen really significant ones that were probably trade languages. That's just a wild guess.
Would they have a national language then?
I'm sure for the nation of Israel, it was kind of like here, everything would have been done in Hebrew. Hebrew, Aramaic would have been the main language for them. And probably when you came there, you better speak Hebrew.
Is the Zadok that's the priest the father of the prime minister?
Good question, thank you. Now, in fact, the Zadok they have up there and the way that's written, they believe what the Hebrew really says is that Azariah was the prime minister. And it's hard in the English to say, how can you get that when this guy gets Zadok the high priest and they don't see the name in there? The Hebrew scholars that I was looking at say, we don't see, that goes back to Athenius, I don't know, I can't remember which one of the Hebrew scholars way back, and he follows somebody else, I can't remember. It was one of those things, I think it was Thenius, Howard, and he says, this guy always looks at that, and whatever that said, he finds an argument for it, and it's wrong. That's the way the guy kind of, these two German guys basically describe it, is that he goes with that and he takes that argument, but they were mistaken. What this Hebrew really says, and then it gives you a whole bunch of these funny little chicken scratchings and says this word here, and I go, oh, just put it in English so I can read it.
So the answer is no.
The answer is no. It's a different one. And there are several other reasonings in it. There's some of these that say it couldn't have been that because it would have had to been a grandson, because and a grandson wouldn't have been old enough, and and things like that. So there's some other arguments of why it couldn't have been the different ones. So then we go down to verse 5, and we've got some more folks there. We've got Azariah, the son of Nathan, and there's arguments about and we got two sons of Nathan here before we get all done.
There's two Azariahs.
And yeah, I think it's kind of like John Smith. It was some of these were really common names, and so it's confusing to us, but they aren't necessarily connected or the same individuals, is the argument I got out of it. But we've got these two guys that were over the deputies, and what we'll see, the ones over the, I better get them down here, I guess, by Azariah. So we got Az down here, and he was over deputies. which we'll look at in more detail. That's about verse 7 through, I think, 19, that we're looking at. They'll list those guys. And what those were, if you remember, he broke the nation up into 12 areas. And those 12 areas correspond to the basically 12 months of the year. And they divided up the assignments. And they were basically, this is tax collectors. The difference being in those days, is often still true in some parts of the world, taxes were collected not in money, but in food. Yeah, it was the beef, the lamb, all the grains and everything that came in for the support of the capital came from these taxes that were levied on the areas. So, in fact, we'll even find out how much when you get down towards the end of the chapter. It tells us what it took to run things there. So those guys were responsible to watch over the tax collection. And then we have some interesting challenges here in Zabud, the son of Nathan, a priest. And actually, again, it says priest. It's the same issue as before in the Hebrew, and it would be more literal to say Zabud, a confidential advisor to the king. So Zabud I'll start the next row over here. Zabud, he is advisor. And more like a personal.
Is this the same Nathan that was priest?
The prophet?
Prophet for
I don't
David?
think so. There's arguments back and forth on that one too, believe it or not. Imagine that. Yeah, there's discussion about whether he indeed was the same Nathan as was the priest, the prophet that came to him, and they don't believe that that was the case. These guys I'm talking to and are looking at. And this Zabud, who is again the son of Nathan, a priest, but rather than priest, it's advisor, and he was the king's friend. This guy seems to be a really close personal friend. He was someone who was not so much an official here as one who served closely, like personal secretary or something, to the king.
So he'd be kind of like Ahithophel was to David.
Yes.
My own familiar friend.
An old familiar friend and counselor and advisor, and that kind of a role was probably what he was doing. So, in fact, I was thinking that there's one, oh, that was one of the other guys. Then we got Ahishar, get that right, was over the household. So Ahishar, and you go, oh, brother, yeah, you got Ahi here. Oh, you got this guy over the household. You think, well, why would you bother to list the guy who's over the household? I mean, this is, what's this, the butler, you're thinking of maybe, is the butler over the household. You got to think a little bigger on the household. By household here probably include most of all the staff and everybody that served in the government under the king.
And the 700 wives.
And the 700 wives, and their servants, and their servants, and their servants. And when you get down the way, there may have been someone, we'll see, that many people in the household. There's a way to calculate and take a guess at that. It could have been somewhere in that neighborhood. So this guy had a big responsibility. These guys are pulling in the tax things, and this guy's figuring out how to get it cooked and served and meted out and managed and cleaned, and yeah, big job, big job. So we've got him, and then Abda. This one's an interesting one. Here, Ab down here, and he is over the forced labor. Forced labor. What's this all about? Well, there were two kinds of forced labor, and I'm not sure which one exactly or both that this may have served. One is, you remember, there were some of the Canaanites that they never ran out or destroyed, and one of the things they did with them is they became forced labor, they became slaves.
Actually, Ron, that's Adoniram.
Donovan.
He's the son of.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you're right. I skipped, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, the Gibeonites
The
too.
Gideon,
The Gibeonites?
Yeah.
There were a number of those who were put into forced labor. This guy probably had something to do with those, but there was another group of kind of forced labor that wasn't really slaves because they were Israelites, and yet they were required to serve. In fact, they were warned way back in Saul's day when they said, "We want a king." He says, "You got to realize this guy will take your children and require them to do stuff." And some of it was military, and a whole bunch of it was building this little building up on the hill. Remember that? He's building a big addition to the city, and it's going to take forced labor, and they were divided up, and Israel provided people to do the work. There were they had experts from outside that were experts in hewing stone and stuff. There were a lot of Israelites. That looks too short. There we go. If I scribble that up, you can. There, I got it. Man, in the corner of my eye, I just said that's wrong. So you've got those folks who also are managed probably, and I don't know just how that broke down, and no one seems to be able to explain it, but this is a whole bunch of people here that they're keeping track of. And I hope you get a little glimpse that each one of these people would have had a whole bunch of folks working for them. You know, the one thing that strikes me is, yeah, go ahead.
Bureaucracy.
Oh, huge,
And politics.
politics and stuff going on and all this sort of thing. And what's really weird to me, you would think you would go over into the land today and find tons of evidence of all of this. And yet we have people over there arguing that, I wonder if David really existed. I wonder if it was just this little fiefdom out there. This was not a huge thing. Was this real or was it not? And God has, for some reason, chosen to leave precious little archaeological evidence. There's little hints and clues and bits and pieces, but not the huge amount of evidence you would expect from something like this. But there are some out there, and as we get further along, I may even try to figure out a way to bring you some pictures or something you can actually see, because there is some.
I just read an article this week about archaeologists, and it used to be that they took their Bible and went out, and that's all been done
You
away
can't do
with.
that
But there's another one now who is doing that. The daughter of one of the men, the old
Studying the city of David. Isn't
right,
she?
and
Yeah.
they're finding things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's taboo now in archaeological circles. Yeah, right here and then.
It just makes you realize how thorough the destruction was later.
That could be part of it, that it was pretty thorough between the various attacks on the nation, that a lot of that had been destroyed.
So that's the point I was going to make, is that the area is relatively small, and it has been gone over
And over and over.
and over. And probably a lot of that material that would have stood has been ground into fine sand.
Yeah, some of these enemies were pretty thorough at just destroying everything inside. And of course, there's layers upon layers when they do the digs, just layers and layers of stuff to go through to find.
Nebuchadnezzar even burned the city.
Yeah, just absolutely destroyed it. But there are little clues, and they'll find these little bullets, would have been a clay seal attached to things, that suddenly has a name, and you can go into the Bible. Funny, you can't use the Bible to look for the bullet, but if you find it, you can go in there and, he's listed in Jeremiah. He shows up over here. There's little clues. And there's some other things out there that have some really interesting evidence that this there's no doubt about this is real. And maybe God did a really good job of erasing a lot of that so we wouldn't worship the wrong thing. But we had a big, busy bunch of folks going there. We don't have a whole ton of time to go through the rest of the deputies and stuff, but since I went to all the trouble to put the map up there, I at least want to run through them briefly to give you an idea. It gives you kind of a hint of how the country laid out. And from a farmer standpoint, it's interesting to me because you know this is what they taxed. These are the areas that they had to pull foodstuffs and things from. Something of value. So the one thing I didn't think of until just now that would have been interesting to do is go look at a modern map of the area and see how much of it still is. Because this country, you know, there's great productive areas that are now under asphalt. Kind of wonder if that's true over there. But let's just take a real quick tour down through these, what do I call them, deputies that are over all Israel. And they provided for the king and his household. Each man had to provide for a month of the year. And here are their names. The first few there, I want you to notice their names are all Ben. And there's a reason for that. Anybody know what the reason when you see Ben something, what it means? Son of, yeah. For some reason, these guys, their names either were just son of, or for some reason they decided to list their father's names and not theirs. That's kind of interesting. So we have Ben-Hur, the guy you've seen in the movies, right? He has the hill country of Ephraim. So Ephraim, you want to think in here, above Benjamin and kind of in that hill country. Ephraim, my understanding is we think hill country and you think desert or something. This would have been probably one of the more productive pieces of ground. Ephraim got a good chunk. He had a good piece of hill country. He had some very productive farmlands, and that was a good spot to have. So they had that. In verse 9, we got Ben Decker, and he's in Makaz and Shalabim and Beth Shemesh and Elohanan, and that just tells you a whole bunch of stuff, right? Well, that the experts say what few they have to kind of pick out ones they have evidence of where that city might have been, and from either other biblical references or from archaeology, that probably came out of Dan, which is kind of over in this neck of the woods over here. It's interesting that the city of Dan is way up here. But the tribal territory was more in that neighborhood. These are pretty rough divisions there, but just to give you an idea. The next guy in verse 10 was Ben-Hesed, and he had the territory of Judah, was of the Araboth, Succoth was in the land of Hepher. So those were the area of Judah, so he would have been somewhere that chunk of ground right there. The next one in verse 11 is Benadab in all the height of Dor. Boy, isn't that exciting. And here's where we know it's the mid-reign, because Taphath was old enough to be his wife. And Taphath is a son, or a daughter rather, of Solomon. So here's an interesting one. This guy, who has a interesting little part of the nation, he has a piece of ground that lies from Carmel down the coastline in that neighborhood right there. That's where they believe he had. And this guy has an in enough with the king that he has one of the king's daughters as his wife.
So he's probably a very important man.
He's very important or something there. He's plugged in somehow. Or the king wanted to keep him on a short leash, I'm not sure which. But he's got an in with the king, and there's nothing else told us other than that. But I think that it's significant that it's mentioned there. So we've got that guy. And in verse 12, we've got Baanah, the son of Ahilud, and he's in all these Tanakh, Megiddo, you've probably heard that one, Megiddo. Beth-Shean, which you've heard of. That was important to Saul, and which is beside Zarephath, below Jezreel, from Beth-Shean to Abel Meholah, as far as the other side of Jokneam. And you went, oh, I know where that is, right? But part of you should have said, right around in here, and where that river valley dumps into the Jordan in there was where, remember, where some bodies were nailed to the wall? They took Saul and his sons and fastened them to the wall in Beth-Shan. And so it's that lower part, another very productive part of Israel. And I think that we're looking at the maps when we were studying that battle, that's a pretty productive agricultural area even today. So that's where he is at. And we'd be in the western part of Manasseh and maybe down a little south of that, the southern part of the Valley of Jezreel there. So. Okay, who else have I got? The next guy is Ben-Geber. And he's in verse 13, right? Yeah, Ben-Geber, or Geber, or Ramoth Gilead. That should sound familiar. The towns of Jair, the son of Manasseh, which are in Gilead, were his. The region of Argob, which is in Bashan. 6 great cities with walls and bronze bars were his.
It says 60 here.
Or 60, I'm sorry. You're right. My eyeballs were. So we've got this guy, Gilead. Everybody knows Gilead is over here, right? So we've got a piece of, sounds like he's got part of Manasseh over on this side. So I guess I'm maybe too far south here. He's got part of Manasseh. He's got a big chunk of ground and some very significant cities that are mentioned elsewhere in the Bible as having these being conquered. I think those were the ones, if I'm not mistaken, see if I made a note here. Yeah, it's the kingdom of Og that was defeated by Moses by a man named Jair, J-A-I-R, and they were conquered, those cities back in Deuteronomy are mentioned. So a powerful chunk of ground, and one guy is over all those. So he's probably a really important guy. We're almost out of time. I don't know if we'll make it here or not. So we've got 14 is really short. Ahinadab, the son of Iddo, in Mahanaim. Mahanaim is a familiar name.
Yes.
That's where David ran when he left Jerusalem, got run out of town by his son. So that's over somewhere off this river. He's somewhere in the middle here. We don't know how big an area out of that city he controlled. So somewhere in the middle there. We've got 15, Ahimaaz in Naphtali, and he also married Basemath.
And he was the son of Zadok.
And he could have been a son of Zadok.
Says in my Bible.
Yeah. So, again, which Zadok? I don't know. Was he the son of the priest or someone else? It's possible that he was. We just don't know for sure.
My Bible references
Back to
that
yeah.
son of the priest that they gave him orders to take his son
And
and you know.
yeah, so it could very well have been that this guy, in fact, I think I had a note to myself that he might be, yeah, possible son of Zadok. And he marries a daughter of Solomon, so he's connected big time. And he's got this, basically the territory of Naphtali. Did I put him? Oh, okay, up here. He's got this chunk up here. It's his. Hope I got that one right. I get lost in these guys.
That would be politically, off into that area, kind of has a strong connection, keeps it
Yeah.
under the reign
Yeah.
of Solomon.
Yeah, there's some, it's interesting. You wonder, is the marriage to the daughter because the guy has lots of pull with the king, or is the marriage to the daughter because the king has pull with the son-in-law? How did that all work? And how did they choose who gets to serve where? It's really not much information out there as to which was the choice assignment and which was the end of the world. I'm not sure about that.
Maybe want to banish this daughter.
Yeah, if you want to get this daughter out of your hair, send her to this guy. Way out.
Well, Ron was 700 wives. Yeah.
He had lots to choose from.
He had a couple of daughters.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I've checked in on Bezemath is it's usually, there's three of them in the Bible. And one of them was Hittite, which was Uriah. And what guy wonders about all this.
The connections to Uriah are, yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I didn't think to pursue that one and see where she shows up, or that name anyway. But so, yeah, it makes you wonder just whose daughter she was, which wife. So, okay, so we've got him. Let's see if we can quickly get through the others and then we'll try to wind this up. We've got Ba'anah in verse 16, who is the son of Hushai in Asher and Bealoth. Wow, that name Hushai should sound familiar. Territory of Asher is right here. So we got, he's up here. And Hushai, remember Hushai? He is a really very close friend of David's. Hushai was one of his inner circle and one of his trusted counselors, a friend. Here's the son of that guy who has an important responsibility in the nation.
He the rascal that came down there and didn't go across the river with him?
No.
The same for his son or something?
No, that was, losing the names now.
The old guy.
The old guy.
Yeah.
Hushai was the old guy. There's the old, yeah, there's the old guy from over in Mahanaim you're thinking of, I think. Yeah, he was from over in Manasseh. But this is a different guy. This was one that was in the palace with him in Jerusalem. And then we got Jehoshaphat, which is a common name, shows up a whole bunch. He had another interesting part. He's got a little bit of Zebulun and a chunk of Issachar in the plain of Jezreel. Look in verse 17 where it says the son of in Issachar. It says he was up here in Issachar. So he's got, here's the other guy's part. He's probably got this upper part up here that's kind of split between, may have had, like I say, it says Issachar possibly had some of Zebulun's territory as well. And I think we got two more and we're out of here. Shimei in verse 18, a different one than the other. Well, maybe. We don't know. Was he faithful to Solomon during the revolt? He's mentioned in chapter 1, or this name is mentioned in chapter 1, as one of the ones that didn't go to the dinner when Solomon's brother had the rebellion. His name is there. If it's the same one, might be. He was close to home. He had Benjamin right there. And the last one in verse 19 is Geber, and he has a huge assignment. It's not very long in the verse. Geber, the son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan, and he was the only deputy in the land. That's like getting assigned to Eastern Washington, I think. You don't have very many representatives, but they have a huge chunk of territory, and he's assigned to a whole bunch of something out here somewhere that nobody else has. Bashan, I think, maybe takes in Reuben out here. Might even go down like that. He's got a big chunk of territory out there, and it makes a point of saying he had this huge assignment all by himself. Phew. Wow. We got through them, and like I say, you look at it and go, now what? So what? Well, it's interesting, and I think it builds for others, and there's not, like I say, not a whole ton of lessons here, except there's a big chunk of territory that he was pulling stuff from just for his daily stores. And we looked last time, we'll see later, his thing goes clear to the river Euphrates, his influence. And he's pulling in more than just, this is just the basic stuff to keep the palace going, the food stuff. He's pulling in tribute from Egypt, from Assyria, from all over the place, coming in. And he needs these guys running all this stuff, because it's huge. And the rate of growth must have been just incredible. The amount of construction that was going on, when you read about, in those 40 years, you think how long it takes to build something significant, and with the labor they had, it is huge. The amount of stuff that was going on and the amount of money that was being spent was just astronomical. If you look at the part, God says, I am going to bless all these things with honor and money and all that, it's right here, is the evidence of that. So, let's close with prayer, and we can put something together week after next. Won't be here next week. Father, we thank you for this lesson this morning and just helping us to grind through all these places and people and weird names. But may we somehow be able to see in that a glimpse of your glory as you glorified this King Solomon and gave him the wisdom to run all of this and administer it and pick the people to make it happen, and for your blessing that had to be on everything to make it all come together, make the crops flourish, and give them the ability to become what you made of them. Father, we have the privilege of taking a peek at the nation at the height of their glory before the fall from sin that started to destroy them. And Father, we may be even seeing a tiny peek of the glory that will be reestablished under Jesus Christ when he comes back to rule the nation once more as their King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and run his base of operations here. We just thank you, Father, for that chance to see that glimpse and to anticipate what that kingdom may look like, and the privilege that we have through his sacrifice to be adopted into the family and be part of that reign. We thank you, Father, in Jesus' name.